Welcome to Sister Wives with Mary Jane Kay, where I discuss all things Sister Wives, recap the train wreck that is Sister Wives, and give my 2 cents. Now, I've watched Sister Wives since its inception, and I always predicted that what's currently happening in this season would happen. I saw it already, the writing on the wall in season 1, it's super predictable, and I really feel horrible for the kids, and I know it must be really hard for them, but I'm really happy for Christine, because Christine is leaving. And it's amazing that she understands that she deserves better. And she's actually breaking away from a relationship where she knows she will never get what she should, even though it's difficult. And King Cody, I'm not a fan of. And he's had many red flags over the years. And eventually I'll go through and probably start from episode 1 and review all the episodes. But he's done a lot of horrible things to his family. And one red flag, I want to just do a little intro on the family dynamic before I get into the episode. He's done a lot of horrible things. One red flag that really solidified it for me, and there's a plethora of red flags, mind you, but was his inability to support Isabel and Christine and put his daughter's physical and emotional needs before his ego and his C19 paranoia. Now, when Cody has a rocky relationship with one of his wives, what I've noticed over the years is he extends his attitude or inattentiveness that he has towards his wife, the disdain, to his kids to the point of emotional neglect. And Isabel really, she's beautiful, gorgeous, intelligent, and I give her a lot of credit. She seems like an amazing daughter, intelligent, kind, and she seems to really want to please her father. And because her father has a shaky relationship with Christine, I feel he extends that to his kids with her. And Isabel has scoliosis. It's incredibly painful. And when it's at over 50-degree angle, you operate. So it was almost there. And the doctor already suggested initially when they had diagnosed Isabel with scoliosis that surgery was inevitable. But Cody was against surgery from the very start. And he told Isabel initially she would never be getting the surgery. And she struggled through the pain. And Cody insisted that he didn't want her having the surgery. And he told her that you're going to have an ugly scar on your back if you get the surgery. And scoliosis is incredibly painful. It can even be dangerous. It pushes on your ribs. It can compress your organs. And it's severe, especially if it's severe. And it's a very serious surgery. And in fact, someone that I know very well had the surgery. And they were in the ICU for over a week. We didn't know if they would make it. So that's how serious the surgery can be. And it turned out that during the pandemic, Isabel was in so much pain. She knew that she needed to have the surgery. The pain was so severe, it was affecting her quality of life. And Cody, even at that point, didn't care about his child's pain. He was still resistant and he refused to go. And he even called Christine and her kids going to New Jersey for major surgery that she definitely needed pronto, a vacation. He referred to what Christine going to New Jersey with her kids as a vacation, when Isabel was going to have this very serious back surgery. And I want to point out that initially Isabel tried very hard to avoid the surgery. And I feel like she really endured a lot of pain because she wanted to go with what her father wished for her. But it was to the point, this girl would have a back brace, a bulky back brace she would have to wear everywhere. And then she had specific scoliosis exercises that she had to do over and over in pain, painstakingly. After school, she didn't have time for friends. She didn't have time for after school activities. All she did was devote herself to these scoliosis exercises and working out in pain and wearing a brace every day, 24/7. That's very difficult for anyone to do. That's how much Isabel really wanted to please her father. And Cody, for months, due to C19, he says, has been exclusively shacked up with Robin. He's adamant that he refuses to go to support Isabel or to support his other wife. And he said, with Isabel present, mind you, can't she go alone? Can't Isabel go alone? Meaning fly to New Jersey and do this life-threatening, difficult, serious surgery without her mom or her dad due to C19. That would have been Cody's wishes. And he meant for his minor daughter to fly alone to New Jersey from Arizona during a pandemic in pain to go have life-threatening surgery by herself. Cody has no emotional intelligence at all, no self-awareness, and he lacks even just basic empathy. Isabel was terrified, and she looked at her mom with concern, and Christine had to reassure her, you won't be alone. Fuck no, I'm going to go with you. I would never do that to you. And it broke my heart. And I had many surgeries as a kid, and I was in pain, left alone in the hospital a lot. So it was really upsetting to see Cody completely disregard his daughter, basic decency, and his role as a father and a husband. Cody doesn't go, and before they leave for the surgery, Cody has the nerve to ask Isabel, "Are you going to be a bitter old housewife because I didn't go with you?" Cody does everything according to his ego, and he only regards his own feelings, his own fears, his own emotions, what's convenient for him, and he disregards everyone else. The wives and Cody have a really interesting dynamic. Mary is the first wife, and they both come from families that follow the same faith, and it's an offshoot of the Mormon religion that practices polygamy. And they married young, and I believe they genuinely loved each other when they got together. Cody's second wife is Janelle. Now, what's interesting about this is that Janelle was actually married to Mary's brother, and she was actually Mary's sister-in-law before she became Mary's sister wife. She divorced Mary's brother, and she got into the faith, and she married Cody. So she became Cody's second wife and Mary's ex-sister-in-law and current sister wife. And another interesting aspect is that Janelle's mom, may she rest in peace, she wasn't on the show much, but when she was on, you could see she was really engaging and really intelligent, and she really seemed like the most practical and reasonable person on the show. Maybe that's where Janelle gets it from, and I liked her a lot, and she ended up marrying Cody's dad, Wynn, and she became SisterWives with Cody's mom. And on the show, they explain it as Janelle's mom being curious about the polygamous lifestyle, wanting to know what her daughter was getting herself into, and she met Cody's dad and they hit it off. Next in the family, we have Christine, and she came in as the third wife. And Christine was considered polygamy royalty. She comes from a very prominent family in their religion. She's beautiful, bubbly, full of fun, vibrant, and she's also the most compassionate, nurturing, loving, caring mother. I've seen just on the show the way she communicates with her kids, the way that she interacts with her kids, with all the Brown kids. You can feel the love and see that it's completely genuine. And Christine not only raised her own biological kids with Cody, but also Janelle's kids while Janelle went to work. And Janelle's kids seem very attached to Christine, and the bond and the loyalty that the kids have for Christine and the bond between Janelle and Christine is really heartwarming to see. Christine would be the last wife that I would think would be leaving, but she is the first wife to leave. She has evolved so much and grown a lot from season 1 to now. And it's really hard because her instinct was probably to hold on and keep the family together. But she knew repeatedly, over and over, she was not getting what she deserved from Cody. And she was asked by him to put everything else first, the rest of the family and Cody's needs, and allow that to supersede her relationship with him, his relationship with his kids, all of it. Next up, Cody marries Robin, the fourth wife. And she was the young new wife. Fast forward, and now his other wives look better and better. And Robin has aged like, I'll just leave it at that. But I think her personality and the emotionally manipulative tactics we see Robin use maybe make her less attractive. I'm not really sure. So how Cody used to manage dividing the time with his wives was he would rotate nights. So initially every wife had 2 nights or so, and they would rotate. And after Robin joined the family, that had to be adjusted. So each wife got less time from Cody, of course. And when Cody was courting Robin, engaged to her, about to marry her, Christine was pregnant with her last child, Truly. And Christine was in the hospital in the process of contractions, waiting to give birth. And Cody takes time to take Robin outside when he drops off the kids so Robin can watch them, to make out with her when he was just dropping the kids off really quick for Robin to watch, while Christine was in the hospital just with the company of her minor daughter, waiting till Cody returned. I felt as though it was inconsiderate, but it wouldn't be the first inconsiderate thing that Cody did. After Cody married Robin, the family dynamics changed a lot, and you can tell that Cody is in love with Robin. They communicate really well, they have great chemistry together, and you can see that he is really over the other wives. And you see, as soon as Cody marries Robin, as the show progresses, season after season, he starts shifting to Robin and away from his other wives and kids. The first wife Cody alienates is Mary, and issues started with Christine because Christine was the youngest wife, the newest wife, and the third wife, the last wife. Christine really didn't anticipate that there would be a fourth wife. Then Robin comes in and completely rips apart the family dynamic. And now Mary who was the first wife, the only legal wife on paper, and she was the head wife in charge. And Mary gives up her legal marriage and divorces Cody so selflessly so that Robin can become the legal wife in order for Cody to adopt Robin's kids. And all four wives are spiritually married to Cody, but one wife is the legal wife. And the legal wife is the one in charge if, God forbid, something were to happen to Cody. And this is a side note, but around the time that Cody adopts Robin's kids, she gifts him a custom-made painting that initially was a photo of her with her first husband and kids when they were small. And what she does is she removes her ex-husband's picture and has the painter paint in Cody because she feels as if Cody was always meant to be her kid's father. So she takes an old family photo when the kids were small, takes her ex-husband out and puts Cody in and makes a custom painting which they hang in their house. And I just thought that was a little weird, maybe a little disrespectful to the biological father who is probably still in the kids' lives. I thought it was a little odd, but to each their own. Oh, speaking of Robin, Robin is really manipulative. And her nickname is Sobbin' Robin. She fake cries constantly. Sometimes it's real, but most of the time it looks like she's just scrunching her face up and wiping away non-existent tears. And she really uses her fragility and anxiety and emotional instability as a manipulation tactic. And she and Cody seem to have a genuine relationship, and it seems they really want to be together exclusively, as though Cody's other wives are an obstacle to that. And Cody is using the pandemic as an excuse to shack up exclusively with Robin and alienate the other wives further, as well as all of his kids. And that has created a lot of resentment towards Cody, both from his kids and from his wives. Cody's ego just cannot comprehend why everyone seems to be happy and living well without him. Cody seems to have decided that he is over the religion thing and over polygamy. He doesn't think it's worth it anymore. He knows everyone is miserable and he really seems to just want to be with Robin. And Cody has even said Robin's house feels like his home and her kids feel like his kids. And he says he's no longer in charge when he goes to the other houses. And Cody's other wives and kids no longer take Cody seriously, and they don't mind if he's there or not. Especially at Christine's, it really feels like it is more fun without him and almost a damper on the fun when he is around. Probably because no one has to walk on eggshells or deal with an ego the size of Texas, but that's just my opinion. Christine's home dynamic seems nurturing and loving and fun and good vibes, and Cody has a very intense, off-putting negative vibe, so he probably severely harshes the mellow when he's around. Everyone has gotten used to doing their own individual lives as if his wives are single moms now, and they seem to love it like a weight has been lifted off of their shoulders. But for the kids, it must hurt a great deal, knowing their father is at Robin's with their kids 24/7 and they get no investment from their dad. That's tough, and it creates a ton of resentment, and Cody keeps pushing this season this idea that the other wives should be putting him ahead of their kids. And that's so narcissistic and wrong, and I'm so glad Janelle and Christine have refused to bow down to King Cody. It's highly likely that the kids probably resent Cody big time for not connecting with them, not making the effort, but they also see the way he treats Janelle and Christine, and it creates a further divide because they know how Cody treats Robin. Also, if Cody is unhappy with one of his wives or has a strained relationship, I've noticed that he extends that completely to his kids with zero self-awareness of how unfair that is or the emotional pain that it causes. And Cody reiterates episode after episode that he is no longer in charge in Janelle and Christine's homes, and he feels like there is no loyalty. He mentions a lack of respect and loyalty a lot. To Cody, the definition of loyalty seems to be obedience, as in, I'm the king, I'm the head of the family, I'm the leader, the dominant leader who holds all the power, you must obey me. And when Cody goes over to the other wives' houses, the wives have become the heads of their own houses, and he knows he is no longer running the show. Cody stays at Robin's house because he feels they all do, as he says, blind obedience, and he says there is loyalty and respect, and they live in a huge house. Robin has 2 grown kids and one that's almost graduating, and Saul, who is around 5, and Ari, who is around 3 or 4. And Cody and Robin are always at the house with the 3 grown kids permanently under quarantine, and everyone is to live strictly at home due to C-19. And no one other than Mary, and only very recently, is allowed in her home. Yet somehow, during COVID, Robin needs a nanny, even when there are 2 grown adults, three other grown kids in the house. She needs a nanny. None of the other family members are supposed to interact as per Cody's rules. No one's supposed to see each other. People have to greet each other for birthdays outside from the door. Yet Robin can have a nanny in her house. And she is paranoid about COVID, about C19, just as Cody is paranoid about C19. But funnily enough, her nanny gets COVID, and next episode, we will see the breakdown this causes with Robin. I do not doubt that there will be tears. Whether fake or real, I don't know, but there will be tears. Let's get into the episode, Season 16, Episode 9, The Teflon Queen. I want to start by giving all the credit in the world to Gabe. This episode was really heartbreaking to watch. Gabe is probably my favorite Brown child of the Brown family. He seems to be really deep, and he's able to be vulnerable, and he's incredibly rational, and he sees things as they are, and he says things as they are. He seems to be very insightful for his age, and he seems to really have a high emotional intelligence, way higher than his father Cody by leaps and bounds. And Janelle is very rational as well, so I know that he gets all his smarts from his mother. I've seen Gabe stand up not only for his mom, Janelle, but also for Christine. And he seems to be very loyal. And we see Gabe plead with his father. And we watch Gabe be incredibly vulnerable and open. And Cody gives absolutely nothing back, like talking to a wall. And honestly, I even cried during that scene because I really, really, really felt for Cody's kids. And Gabe is just desperate to get through, just for a connection, for some nurturing, for some reassurance from his father. And Cody is like an obstinate teenager with a huge ego and no self-awareness, and he gives Gabe absolutely nothing back, and I know that hurts. And in this situation, it really felt like Gabe was the father and Cody was the infantile child. And all Cody could do was blame his wives and blame his kids. Not to mention lament again about not being the leader. Not having his way. Cody might say that this is all about C19, but I highly doubt that. It's obvious it's not, and it's sad to watch because you can really see how destructive Cody is and the emotional pain he gives to his kids and wives who just want a connection, who just want something back, but Cody has nothing to give. I want to talk a little bit about Cody's list of C19 rules and restrictions that he expects all his kids and wives to follow if they ever want to see him or interact with him. And he talked about this list, and he handed his wives pieces of paper a few weeks ago. And these aren't just the usual CDC guidelines. Cody has come up with his own rules. For example, everyone must be 10 feet apart. No one should leave home. You can only do or preferably do grocery pickup and wipe down every item of groceries. Also, when you get the mail, wipe down every piece of mail. And you have to change your clothes whenever you leave the house and come back in. There's more, but this is beyond CDC guidelines, Cody's requirements for C19. And I really feel that Cody did this on purpose to make it so painstaking that it would be absolutely impossible to adhere to this. So that way he gets exactly what he wants, and which is 24/7 to be exclusively with Robin and use C19 as the excuse. I really don't think he's that scared of C19. He's used C19 as an excuse to alienate the family and even Mary, who lives alone. And you can tell she just craves some socialization, some human contact. And she adheres to Cody's requirements. She's just dying to spend a little time with Robin and the kids. And she was left alone for months to be lonely before Robin and Cody permitted her to come over. And I think it's really cruel. And safety is one thing, and leveraging C19 as an excuse to make the choice to be exclusively at Robin's and neglect your other kids and wives is shameful. To want to use this as an excuse to be at Robin's 24/7 is disgusting. And I'm not really sure where Cody got his degree in epidemiology, virology, or his formal educational scientific background, but this is coming from a guy who told his daughter McKelty that when you kiss, the other person's hormones exchange with yours and mix in the saliva in your mouth, and that creates a biological reaction. That's what Cody's thoughts were on kissing. also coming from a guy who all the wives went on a trip, Christine went away, and Cody was in charge of the kids. He had to watch Truly, and he was so inattentive that he didn't give her enough hydration or water that her kidneys shut down, and she unfortunately almost passed away. Thank God she's alive. She had to battle for her life, and it was really unforgivable, and it was really due to negligence and him really not knowing how to be an involved parent. Yet apparently Cody is qualified enough to know better than the CDC to make his own COVID rules. Gabe asks his dad, what is the plan for Christmas? And Cody says that they have to bring exposure down in order to unite up close and personal for Christmas so they can finally be together, minus the social distancing, one big happy family. And Gabe says he's quarantining already to limit exposure. And Cody mentions that the agreement with all the moms was that he would be the only person to travel from house to house. And Gabe says that he feels like his dad expects everyone in the family to drop what they're doing and stay home so he can safely have the ability to move from house to house at his whim, basically while everyone gets to be in a permanent quarantine under house arrest as a result. And Gabe says no one is down, everyone's ignoring it. And mind you, everyone in the family is already following the CDC guidelines to the T, but they aren't all willing to follow these extra mandates Cody, or more likely Robin, have pulled out of a hat. Gabe reiterates to Cody again that when Hunter arrives, everyone will begin quarantine to be ready for Christmas as a family. Cody asks Gabe if Gabe understands what it means to quarantine, and Gabe says that every parent is telling him a different thing. And I mentioned the dynamics in the family earlier, and it really comes into play here. Cody says that shouldn't be the case. He expects that all the moms will tout the same message, which would strictly be Cody's rules. And Cody explains that every wife got a slip of paper with the rules, so it shouldn't be that way, that he's getting different answers from every parent because Cody provided his wives with a piece of paper. And Garrison responds, you've got to talk to them. You can't give them a slip of paper. And it seems that Garrison knows exactly how ridiculous his father is being. Gabe says that Cody insists that the parents got together and they made an exact plan for Christmas, that everything is settled, but Gabe doesn't feel like they actually are all on the same page or like the adults who should be in charge are at all on the same page coherently with what they're going to do about Christmas. And Gabe is really concerned and confused, and he says he really doesn't know what's going on. And I really feel for the kids. Regardless of their ages, a child always wants to feel like their parents are on the same page and in charge, and that, especially during a pandemic, the parents will know what's up and provide some kind of security. But even Cody's sons seem to know that everyone is on a different page, and it must make them feel a little insecure. And it really feels in this scene that Cody's sons are the mature adults and Cody is the child. And we'll have this vibe throughout not only the show and the season, but definitely this episode. Cody is really trying to sell his guidelines to his kids, and Cody says that it's like managing a business or work. They follow the C19 guidelines, and the family should too. And Garrison says, we're a family. And he goes on to say, can't we verbalize that we are following the rules for Christmas and trust each other? It's not a business, it's a family. And Cody says the problem is with trust about the adherence to his rules. And again, everyone is following the CDC rules, but these are Cody's extra COVID rules. And Cody makes it clear that he wants no discussions about the pandemic at Christmas. Gabe says in confessional that his dad can say what he wants, but it will be discussed over Christmas for sure. And we see Gabe smiling almost in ridicule, and Garrison has a smirk on his face during this confessional scene. You can tell from the body language they resent their dad and they don't take him that seriously. And Cody says in a confessional that he thinks his sons want to fight with everyone, and if Christmas doesn't go smoothly, he isn't having Christmas as a family anymore after this. He's putting his foot down. And Cody asks his sons to abide by the rules and quarantine other than going to work. Other than going to work, they're supposed to stay in their house. He then brings to his kids how Christine went for a massage, and he lets his kids know that won't work. That's against the rules. And I almost feel like his mentioning Christine's deviating from his rules so he can shame her and signal to his kids that if it doesn't work out for Christmas, here's the reason why. And Christine happens to be the wife he's on the rocks with currently, and I believe things are shaky with Janelle as well. But as I mentioned, Christine is the first one who will be divorcing Cody. Cody doubles down and he shames Christine a second time about the massage, this time in confessional, not in front of his kids, saying that she went and got a massage right in the middle of the pandemic and he wanted to see his kids. But because Christine went for a massage, he was prevented. He could not see his kids. Here's a prime example of how Cody uses the pandemic to alienate his wives and kids and neglect them emotionally. It's also an example of how he uses the pandemic as an excuse not to see his kids, and worse, he makes it seem as though Christine is the reason he is not able to see his kids because she was irresponsible and went for a massage. And provided you follow CDC guidelines, it is safe to get a massage at this point, 8 months in. But it goes against the king's decree, and since Christine went against Cody's way, he is actually punishing his kids because he is mad at his wife. This manipulation makes me sick. Cody is trying hard to make Christine look completely irresponsible when she did nothing wrong. He's purposely trying to make her appear to be far from responsible regarding the pandemic on television when the viewers know Christine loves her kids and she would never do anything to jeopardize them, and the only person who looks bad and irresponsible here as a husband and as a father is Cody. He's trying to suggest to his kids on television that it is their mom's fault he can't come by, rather than him using C19 and his extra rules as his way to not have to see them at all. If a father really wants to invest in their kids, it shows. Come hell or high water, they invest, they find a way. But Cody can't seem to find it in himself, and it's highly concerning. Cody triples down and says that Christine getting a massage was a psychological circumvention of his ability to see his kids, as if Christine intentionally disobeyed him to prevent him from having the ability to go over and see his kids. If Cody wants to see his kids, there is no reason on earth to prevent him. And he's trying to put the onus on Christine and almost punish her kids with him by saying, you disobeyed my rules, so I'm depriving our kids of my connection with them. And that is manipulation and an example of how he extends the state of his relationships with his wives to the kids as well. And this is incredibly damaging and cruel and unfair. Gabe explained that these past 8 months or so of C19 have been like someone with a zap gun coming around and saying, you don't get to see your dad, no more dad, zap, you're a danger to your family. And Gabe looks really hurt, and this is a hard conversation to watch. Cody says he may have passed the buck and he should have explained better at the beginning. He really wants to drive home his way, and he mentions the big picture. He asks, if mom gets sick, who will take care of her? And his sons don't hesitate to say, us. And Cody wasn't expecting that answer, so he says, no, but you've got school. And Gabe explains that his school is online, and Garrison explains that if his mom got sick, he would quit his job to help her. And from Cody's body language, you can tell he wasn't expecting this. He was expecting to put fear into his kids that they would not have any clue what would happen should Janelle get sick, and that finally they would see the light and succumb to his way. But so far, it's not going Cody's way. Cody admits normally it would be him who would have to take care of an ailing Janelle. And he says that wasn't the right answer that the kids gave. And Cody thinks Gabe is missing the point that it should be about avoiding getting Janelle sick in the first place. Gabe reiterates in confessional that the people who are in Janelle's house right now would be the people caring for her, and that's not his dad, Cody. And Cody says that if he gets sick and one of the other moms gets sick, then she has no one looking out for her kids. Cody says he has a much bigger picture than anyone else in the family to worry about. And Garrison says that ignorance led them to blame Robin for Cody's behavior and the COVID regimen that Cody wants to enforce on the family. Gabe says he thought Robin was behind the crazy C19 restrictions, and Cody responds that that's because she's the obedient wife. And in confessional, Cody said that whatever poison put that in their mind that Robin is to blame, he doesn't know if it's polygamy poison or their mother poisoning them, because that attitude is fucked up. Cody doesn't know why his kids assume Robin is to blame just because she is the one keeping his rules. Cody says they think it's all about Robin, but it's really about them not giving a shit about everybody else. This leads me to believe it really is about Robin, because in Cody's confessionals, he gets incredibly defensive regarding Robin believing the other moms put these ideas in the kids' heads as if they can't see reality and assess it themselves, like they need to be spoon-fed by their moms to have their own thoughts. To have any thoughts at all, they must come from the mother. Now, Cody is manipulating again here by deflecting and blaming his own kids for not caring and explaining that his behavior and distance from his kids isn't about Robin, but about his kids not following his protocol. So he's now pinning his neglect as a father on his kids and saying it's their fault for not being obedient. He reiterates that Robin and her kids follow all the protocols while Christine is still traveling. And Gabe and Garrison have been socializing. And Cody says Robin's kids are like prisoners, always staying in the house as per his wishes. And here he says again that Robin and the kids have all been compliant. And Gabe suggests that they're teammates. And we want that. We all want to get along. And he's trying really hard to get through to Cody. And he says, we're just trying to operate as a family here. And he seems devastated and frustrated. He shows a lot of emotion. He's invested, and he is begging his dad to be invested too. And Cody has a beautiful family, bless them. And the only thing he seems to genuinely invest in is his ego and Robin and their kids. In confessional, Garrison says they assumed it was Robin these 8 months, but now they are pitting themselves against Cody because it's on Cody as their dad. Garrison goes on to ask who's making up these rules and lacking in communication other than dad. It's all him. Garrison heads out early and he says he's tired of arguing. They'll agree on it and play their dad's game. He is dripping resentment in confessional. He says, we'll quarantine. You can trust us if you want. If not, that's your problem to figure out. I'm working full time. I've got school. I've got to get going. And Cody says in his confessional that it's great that Garrison came because he agreed to comply with his rules. Cody asks Gabe, now do you finally get it? Do you guys get it? And he apologizes. And Gabe says there's no need, that he knows his dad was under the impression that the communication was being passed down within the families regarding the reasons for the protocols and the protocols themselves. And Cody says it's been hard for Christine. And Gabe defends Christine and he says, not as a diss to the other moms, but Christine is our primary caregiver. And I really admire Gabe's maturity and loyalty. And I can tell that Christine really appreciates Janelle's kids. And I find that to be a really good thing that has come out of this situation. Gabe reiterates that from their youngest ages, Christine has been the one to provide and care for 7 kids at a time, all the time. He respects her and he uplifts her and he gives her credit that she deserves, unlike Cody. All Cody can say is it hasn't been like that since Vegas, almost as a way to discredit or invalidate what Gabe is saying about Christine. And Gabe says people still visit Christine all the time and he used to go over more than once a week to see Christine. Cody can't even articulate words at this point. He just manages an awkward so. And Gabe continues to support Christine, and I loved seeing this. Gabe and Garrison already seem more self-aware and more mature than Cody. Gabe explains to Cody that he can understand why Christine is having a harder time with everything than the other moms. And the camera does a close-up of Cody with his mouth gaping open in disbelief. In confessional, we see Christine, and she says she loves Janelle's kids, and Janelle worked a lot. And she raised all the kids as a bunch, and it's been really hard not having them over all the time. Christine mentions that Cody put a restriction on everyone during the pandemic, that he was the only one allowed to go house to house, but after a while, Janelle and Christine decided they couldn't do it anymore, and they started getting together. Christine says that Cody's rules made her feel as though she had to pick between Janelle and her kids, and all the kids actually, not just her biological kids, but Janelle's kids as well, or Cody. Janelle says that Christine's family and her family hang out a lot and they follow the rules and they quarantine. And if they have both been home for a few weeks and they know it's safe, they will cautiously go do something together, especially outdoors, and they follow CDC guidelines, but they aren't enough for Cody. And Cody says that the family has come together in a clique that has excluded some of the other family members. And he says the cliquiness and the bullying and the exclusion, that Gabe sees that one way, but Cody sees it negatively. And Gabe tells Cody, it's weird not talking about it. Cody closes down. All he can get out is, okay. And Gabe pushes Cody. He tells him, son to father, this is the first time we've sat down in 8 months and talked about why we're doing this. And just you and me, one-on-one. And Cody barely looks at Gabe. He's just messing with a shovel, looking down like a child. All Cody says is that he's told Gabe before the reasons for the protocols. And Gabe says that he likes when Cody calls because he finally gets to talk to him, and that they talk for a little about mutual interests or politics, or slightly about the pandemic in a vague way, but they've never really discussed it in depth, one-on-one. And Cody looks down and he says, while I was away, like they've never talked while he was away, meaning the last 8 months that he spent away at Robin's house. And Gabe reiterates, they never talked. And Gabe looks hurt deeply, and Cody cannot give any reassurance or support. He looks down, eyes averted, and he looks closed off. This is heartbreaking. He gives Gabe absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a shred of accountability, not a promise to be more involved and invested with his son. And it really feels like Cody is the child and Gabe is the mature adult. Gabe is about to cry, and Cody remains silent, looking down, and he says his only issue, his only issue was Cody not calling, not thinking enough of his son to explain this directly and to keep in touch. And it almost feels like Gabe has to beg his father to even call him regularly. And it feels so sad. And it feels like Gabe is pulling teeth or talking to a wall just to try to get a little bit of love and attention and investment from his father. Gabe tells Cody, who still won't look at his son in the eye, I'm your teammate in this. And Gabe in confessional says they aren't doing enough, that his dad is right, there needs to be coherence, but with the COVID guideline, with the C19 guidelines, but that his dad's way of gaining that coherence isn't healthy in a family dynamic. Cody has nothing to say, but Gabe, his son, is full of valuable insight and wisdom, and Cody is so lucky to have a son that wise, insightful, and mature. Cody should feel blessed Gabe wants to be his teammate, and I can honestly say, at his age, Gabe is a million times more self-aware and mature and full of empathy than Cody, and maybe he should be the one running the family and taking control. In confessional, Cody says he is angry and he should be showing Gabe he loves him, but he is so pissed that Gabe is sitting there as an adult, not being accountable and coming at him at different angles, and that has made him defensive. So instead of Cody as the father taking accountability and supporting his son and being the mature one, he acts like a kid, says he's angry and not in himself. He doesn't at all feel at fault for anything. He doesn't seem to care or understand Gabe and his feelings. He feels Gabe being vulnerable is an attack, and it's made him defensive, and he is pissed at Gabe for calling him out, and he deflects by saying he's mad at Gabe for not taking accountability and for not obeying his rules and for quote-unquote attacking him. But it's not an attack for your son to come to you and open up and say how he feels, and just because he won't obey and he's honest about the state of the relationship and how he feels, it isn't a feast for Cody's ego, so he tries to shift the issue to Gabe's accountability and suggests Gabe is causing the strain by not obeying his rules. The onus of this is totally on Cody, the father, not Gabe, the son. And Gabe voices that there is a lot of frustration due to the pandemic, but also in the family dynamic. Things aren't going smoothly. And Gabe says everyone is focused on being right or doing the right thing about the pandemic, and nobody wants to assess the situation and admit this is ruining the family. Cody says he wants to lay down the law with Gabe, and he can't because Janelle won't support Cody. Cody says since the pandemic, he has felt more like that was Janelle's house and it wasn't his house. He says the irony of this is that at Robin's house, he feels more like it's his house, his rules, and his family. He says he's mad at himself that he's not been more patriarchal or more in charge. So his wives not obeying his every whim is because he wasn't forceful and controlling enough in his role, and that has led to his wives taking charge of their own homes. Cody's ego keeps going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny. He doesn't seem to understand that he isn't the most important person in the family, and he may want to be followed and respected and admired, but the more he doubles down on control and obedience, the less he will get. And Janelle says her kids look forward to seeing their dad, and that this has been really hard for them, that all of a sudden he's being so dictatorial about his rules. And Gabe talks about his girlfriend, and Janelle really approves, but Cody's never met her. And Gabe says he was under the impression that he could see his girlfriend, and Cody deflects some more next, and he doubles down by putting the blame on Gabe again. He says Gabe has to choose between Cody coming over to Janelle's house or seeing his girlfriend. So Cody wants to put the blame on Gabe for not going to Janelle's and not seeing her, not seeing his other kids, all because Gabe sees his girlfriend. Just like he blames Christine for getting a massage so he can't go see his kids. He wants reasons related to the pandemic that excuse him neglecting Janelle and Christine and the kids, and all he can do is say Gabe sees his girlfriend and Christine went for a massage, and it isn't against CDC guidelines, but it is against his invented painstaking guidelines that will make anyone lose their sanity. So he says Like, his hands are tied. It's not his fault. It's Gabe seeing his girlfriend and Christine, who got a massage. So he's prevented by Gabe and by Christine from being a good father, from being a good husband, from being present. And it's because Christine and Gabe will not obey him. So it's not his fault. They will not obey him, and they're the ones causing all of this. They're at fault here, not him. And if a man wants to see his kids, they will see them, end of story. And it's not fair to punish his kids and wives and emotionally neglect them to try and force obedience. I find this disgusting. Gabe wants to know from his dad why he would be put in the position to be responsible for choosing his girlfriend or Cody coming to the house, which means Cody's time also with Janelle and Savannah and Garrison. And although I doubt Garrison is too invested in seeing his dad at this point, Gabe knows that his dad is trying to manipulate and shift blame, and he knows his dad is putting him in an incredibly unfair position. Cody counters that he has to make these choices all the time, like being away from Janelle and Christine and her kids. And I want to point out that many times this season, I've noticed Cody referring to his kids as Janelle's kids or Christine's kids. And he refers to Robin's kids as his kids or our kids. But because his relationships are rocky with Christine and Janelle, it's extended to their kids. He puts all ownership of the kids on the mom as if he isn't the father. And I wonder how his kids feel when he doesn't take ownership of them. Gabe reiterates that his girlfriend is strict about C19, and he has done 2-week quarantines from her just so he could see his dad, but Cody never showed up. And Cody just plays clueless. He says he doesn't remember. Gabe remembers, and he reminds him it was this summer. And Cody just says, oh, not I'm sorry, I'll make it up to you, I love you, nothing that you would expect a father to say to reassure his son that he's being supportive. Nothing reassuring or supportive has come out of Cody's mouth. If anything, we see Gabe being supportive of Cody. And Cody says that Gabe needs to understand that he has been told by a lot of people that they were being careful when they weren't. And Gabe says he understands that because Cody has been lied to. And in confessional, Cody says the problem is whether he is being respected in his home or not. He then brings up Robin as an example of the respect he deserves. Cody explains that from the start, Robin sat her children down when she was coming into the family, and she told her kids that they were going into the family, so they must be kind, they must accept the family, and respect the parents, and Cody as the father. And Cody says in other households, they never established those rules, meaning they failed to blindly obey all of Cody's wishes. In confessional, Christine says that she used to be really submissive and compliant, giving Cody anything he wants, doing anything he says, that she used to be that wife, but she's not anymore. Go, Christine. She's head of her house and the one who is present and around. And Christine says that it's hard for the girls to respect their dad when they see as favorites and they struggle with how apparent it is, that he's more comfortable at other people's houses, the other wives' houses. And we all know that she means he's more comfortable at Robin's house. Gabe says they should work as a team and operate as a family. And he says one side of the family would risk getting COVID just so they could be together and hug. And he says even his mom would risk it, so just so the family could be together. And him and Garrison are willing to risk it. And Gabe says mom is overweight and old, and she would still say yes and risk it. And Cody says that this is a fundamental problem in polygamy, to have two households, and he is the head of one, but not the other. Cody tells Gabe that they have different values, and Gabe says it's really different perspectives, but Cody disagrees. He says it's Janelle and Christine making choices that cause the families to be separated. So he has laid blame at Christine's feet for disobeying him and getting the massage, and at Janelle for choosing Christine and the kids over Cody, and at Gabe for having a girlfriend. But none of the blame ever falls on him or Robin, and if anyone says anything against Robin, he defends her in a rage. If Cody views himself as the head of the family, should he not be held responsible for penalizing his children and wives as a punishment for refusing to acquiesce to him? Gabe is smart. He immediately replies that this is a blame game, and Cody retorts, yes, and your mother is the Teflon queen. It bounces off of her onto everybody else. He says he has had to make so many sacrifices for everybody else. And he says Janelle screwed him this summer. Like he's the one who had to sacrifice his relationships with his kids because of Janelle. Cody says Janelle screwed him and Gabe as well. And that when Cody brought up the rules, she would walk out of the meeting. And this meeting where Cody handed all his wives his COVID regimen on a piece of paper ended with Janelle standing up for herself and saying fuck you to Cody. And now he is getting back at her by trying hard to blame Janelle and throw her under the bus to manipulate his son into siding with him. Gabe remains really calm throughout all this, and Cody gets amped up and he's pacing and raising his voice. So in a very calm, adult, mature, differentiated way, the way a parent would address a child throwing a tantrum, Gabe says, I've expressed my emotions and you can discuss yours without getting angry. And Gabe says he understands that Cody's emotion is anger. But Cody says he really doesn't want to throw Janelle under a bus, but that Christine and Janelle made decisions to continue vacationing and hanging out and living life and doing stuff. And Janelle says that Gabe is trying really hard to get his dad to have a relationship with him again. And Christine thinks it's sad that Cody isn't honoring the fact that Janelle is trying really hard. And Christine says Janelle really doesn't deserve it. And she has been really, really loyal to Cody. Cody complains that all the blame has come to him rather than reassuring his son. He says he is sick of it and he wants to know why everyone is blaming Robin. And Gabe says because he spends all of his time there. And Cody says that that's because the other wives are choosing to travel. In confessional, Cody doubles down again on blaming Janelle and Christine, the wives who refuse to obey his extra, super strenuous COVID rules, C19 rules that are even more daunting than the CDC guidelines. Now, Cody says that the narrative they created with their kids is that it's dad's fault. Dad doesn't care about us. Dad doesn't care about you. Gabe says that now we're on the same page and he can try to persuade his mom to be on Cody's team. And he says, I can persuade Christine, I can persuade my mom, and Cody is pissed. And he tells Gabe that Gabe isn't the head of the family. And as I said before, I think Gabe would do 10 million times better at leading the family. Cody yells like a whiny tween, I should have been listened to from the beginning. And they made choices that separated the family, not me. Gabe says that his mom Janelle made the choices for him and for Garrison. And Cody then tries to play like he cares, and he tells Gabe not to knock Janelle. And Gabe says he wants to take responsibility, but I would love to see Cody take responsibility. Gabe is frustrated and hurt and upset and close to tears, and Cody again is displaying no self-awareness, no emotional intelligence, and he asks Gabe, why are you upset? I can't imagine how frustrating and disheartening it must feel to be vulnerable, open up to your dad, and to just get no understanding, no empathy, no reassurance, nothing back from Cody. This really is soul-crushing and sad to see and to watch, and I did tear up watching this, and I really feel for Gabe and Garrison and the other kids affected by their dad's behavior. Now, Cody has wonderful, intelligent, mature kids, and they already surpass him in leaps and bounds, and I really think that it's devastating he doesn't see it. And I think Cody could learn a lot from Gabe and his other kids if he would just receive the info that Gabe is giving him. Gabe says that if he had understood in March what was going to happen, he would have been a teammate. And I think he's emotional because his dad has manipulated him into feeling guilt and responsibility when it's not his fault. I think he also knows that the family is destroyed as a result of his dad's behavior. And he might feel as though if he had fallen in line, things wouldn't have degraded so far within the family dynamic. I think Gabe also knows his dad doesn't get the messages he tried so hard to convey, and he is sad and devastated and frustrated. He has a father that he has already surpassed as far as the ability for empathy and emotional intelligence, self-awareness. So he might know not only does dad not get it now, but he'll never get it. Cody doesn't offer any emotion or love and support. He seems just angry. He isn't getting 100% obedience. And all he says is, okay, we'll operate as a team from now on. And that's just regarding the C19 restrictions. Basically, you'll operate my way. Cody doesn't care about anyone's feelings. His only concern is getting his way, not because he is right, but because he wants to know he is the ultimate leader of this pandemic situation. He wants to be the leader of the family. He wants to be in charge of everything. And the pandemic situation is really breaking down his ego because he knows he can only get his way at Robin's or Mary's. Mary is an empty nester. Her daughter Mariah is fully grown and she's lonely alone in a huge house. And she follows all of King Cody's regiment to a T. But Cody refuses to even consider hanging with Mary, so he can't say that this is strictly about the rules for C19, or surely he would be decent enough to go to Mary's and be supportive of her since she is obeying him, but he's neglected to go there as well. There's awkward silence now at Coyote Pass, and Gabe is crying at this point. And Cody does absolutely nothing to comfort Gabe. He stares coldly in the distance, and he just says, "Let's go home. No, I love you. It'll be okay." Not even one word of reassurance to his son, not even a goodbye, not a reassurance that he will do better and invest in the relationship. He just gets in his truck and leaves. And Gabe says that he's put so much effort into the relationship with his dad that it's hard. It's hard when you dedicate months of your life to trying to reach out to someone and to just not get anything back, not have anything reciprocated. Gabe's really hurt, and he says any chance any chance he had, went into trying to maintain the relationship with his dad, and he didn't get a lick of anything back. He didn't get effort back, and Gabe is crying at this point in confessional, and he asks if he's done. You can tell like he's really perturbed and emotionally upset about this. And then the show, really awkwardly by the way, plays upbeat music, and we see Christine and the kids making gingerbread houses, and Christine talks about the fun Christmas traditions she brings into her family. And Cody says that everyone is quarantining and getting ready to share Christmas as a family, but the family got really sad news that Janelle's mom passed from cancer. Of course, Janelle went to Wyoming to be with her mom, and Cody joins her. He drives separately, and I'm glad he at least did the right thing and supported Janelle through this devastating time. Cody requested that of Mary and Robin that they not attend the funeral, and they agreed. Christine did attend, and Cody mentions that Robin is the wife he can easily communicate with. He can say, "I don't think you should go," and she will just agree with him and say, "Okay, I won't go." And Cody says the funeral is more important than Christmas. Mary says that she's shocked and that Grandma Cheryl was a grandma to all the kids, not just her own biologically. Christine mentions how Grandma Cheryl connected well with people and she'll be missed. And Cody explains that his dad passed, and after that, his mom and Janelle's mom, who were sister wives, stayed very close. And Robin says that Cheryl was a sweetheart and she was a last wife, so they had a lot in common. She couldn't leave it to just kind words about Grandma Cheryl. She had to tie herself into it in some way, like she always does. I really liked Cheryl. I remember in the beginning seasons, the family went to Wyoming and McKelty fell off a horse and hurt her back. And Grandma Cheryl used to be, I believe, in the medical field, a nurse. So she stayed really calm and rational, and she handled the situation, and it could have been an emergency situation immediately. And it stuck out to me because everyone was, in an uproar, and she remained calm and rational, and she was dealing with it in just the chillest way possible. And she just seemed really cool-headed, really intelligent, really with it. I liked her. There was one episode where you meet all the moms of the sister wives, and I liked Grandma Cheryl a lot. And I also really, really liked Christine's mom as well. Now it's a week before Christmas, and Robin heads to Janelle's to check in on her, carrying like a plethora of bags and packages. And she said it's really easy to stop talking to each other amongst the sister wives unless they absolutely need to. Basically reiterating that there's only communication when absolutely necessary. And Janelle doubles down on that, and she says she doesn't communicate with Robin that much. She mentions that there are at-home COVID tests and rapid tests, and that Christmas really wouldn't be happening without this option. So it's been 8 months since the pandemic started of Cody exclusively shacking up with Robin, because Robin is the only one who will, well, I guess Mary as well, who will obey his rules to a T. And Cody hasn't really seen or had that much of a relationship with all of his other kids. But it seems like a real hardship because he had to go to this funeral in Wyoming. He's been, staying away from Robin's kids until he tests negative. And Janelle mentions that Cody isn't able to see Robin's kids unless he tests negative. He's been seeing them this whole 8 months, but he hasn't seen his other kids, and he doesn't seem too concerned about that. Robin mentions that Christmas is a week away, and they could be positive, and Christmas would just be her and the kids and Mary alone. Again, not how it'll affect the whole family as a whole, but how it affects Robin and how it affects her kids. She makes everything exclusively about her. And Janelle says that no one expected the pandemic to last so long, and it's changed the family culture, maybe even permanently. Robin laments that she's been going through a mourning process. Now, I can't tell you how insensitive that is. Jess lost her mom. She is the one mourning. And Robin is going through a mourning process because of how difficult C19 has been on her. Janelle just lost her mother. She is mourning that loss. And Robin again is making it about herself and saying that she is mourning the way the family dynamic was before. Robin feels that the pandemic has pulled the blanket off all of their issues. And Robin says in confessional that these things were there before the pandemic. And they have two choices. They can fix it or let it change them as a family. Mary says that the pandemic has been rough and has opened up a new platform for the family to gripe. Janelle says C19 has exposed things that are very noticeable now, and she tells Robin that she's been reflecting on plural marriage and polygamy, and she does choose plural marriage, but she ponders it and has to make a conscious choice to be in it. She's thought about it, and her kids are almost grown, and she really doesn't need to stay. And Janelle says it was a great way to raise kids, that the relationship between her and Cody is strained, and it would be easy to walk away. Mary says that she's never thought about leaving because Mariah is grown, and Christine says what she hoped polygamy to be when she was younger ended up being something very different from what she has lived. And she needs to be present for Christmas and grateful for the family she has. And she says she is who she currently is because of enduring polygamy. Robin laments again that she has a lot to think about. She's shocked at how the family has handled the pandemic, and it made her think, why would they all choose to continue doing this how they have? Robin tells Janelle she really wants to work everything out. Janelle says maybe everyone has lost sight of being all in this together, and she says this experience will remake the family and the family will look differently. She says she hopes it looks the same, that all the adults are together still. Cody got back from the funeral 4 days ago, and now we see that he's taking a test to see if he is cleared because he is eager to get back to Robin's house. Cody says he is nervous about the test, and he feels hypocritical because he broke his own rules. He promised Robin he'd be around for Saul and Ari for Christmas, and he's praying he tests negative. Cody promised Robin he'll be back for Christmas, and he had to give her the confidence to let him leave. If he tests positive, he isn't sure if he'll ever be forgiven, and he seems to be really concerned that Robin approves of his decisions, and he fears Robin holding a positive test over his head. But he doesn't show any concern for his kids' approval or his other wives, only for Robin and their kids together and her kids that he has adopted as his kids. But all of his other wives, all of his other biological kids, he doesn't seem that concerned over. He's very concerned of Robin's impression of him, but he doesn't care about Gabe or his other wives, apparently. Cody tests negative, and he reunites with Ari and Saul and Robin. Robin says that it's a relief because the kids miss their dad. It's been 10 days, and Ari barely makes it through 2 and struggles with Cody leaving. So Robin is concerned to be sure Ari isn't distressed by Cody leaving, but not distressed that Isabel wanted her dad there so much after her life-threatening surgery that when she woke up, he was the first person she asked for. And he wasn't there. He was with Robin. And that didn't distress Robin too much, apparently. She only is distressed when it comes to her kids and herself. I have to say, I really feel bad for Mary watching this scene. Robin goes to hug Cody, and he unzips his jacket so that she can put her arms around him, and he hugs her enthusiastically, but he won't even touch Mary with a 10-foot pole. Now, it's Christmas Eve, and everyone is getting together after following Cody's regimen. Cody says that he was struggling to be excited because he accepted that he was prepared to not have Christmas as a family if everyone didn't comply with his rules, because he was tired of the fight. He just wants a peaceful Christmas. And Robin texted the family ahead of time with topics that were off limits for kids to discuss, like the pandemic or politics. Christmas, of course, is at Robin's house, and everyone is opening gifts, and Ari gets a gift from Savannah, but she doesn't know who her own sister is or what her name is, and Robin has to jump in to let her know that's Savannah. So the families have definitely been separated for a while for Ari to forget the names of her other siblings. Robin says that Christmas melts away all the C19 struggles, and Cody says this year has come with many struggles, like the pandemic and Grandma Cheryl's passing, And because of that, Cody feels blue. He doesn't feel joyful this Christmas. Janelle says they have damaged some relationships and that it's time to get back to normal and smooth those things out. Christine said that this has been the quietest Christmas ever and that Christmases are really good because they put all problems aside and they tackle it another day and they focus on celebrating Christmas together instead. That Christmas was great. And in next episode's preview, we have a birthday and we discover that the nanny and her husband have C19. Christine says she knows this means they won't ever hang out again. Christine reveals that Cody said he doesn't want a sexual relationship with Christine anymore, and Christine won't stay in a marriage with no intimacy. Cody goes to Christine's, and he finds his stuff in the garage, packed in boxes. Christine is in tears, saying she doesn't know what she's going to tell her kids, and this is like really hard and sad and difficult to watch, but Christine deserves to feel as much love back as she invests in her husband, in her family, and in people in general. And as hard as this is, I really genuinely believe in the long run, she's going to be so much happier for it. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like or a comment, subscribe, share. Thank you guys so much. See you guys next week.